Yeah, thank you for being here, Malcolm.
Pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
My first question is, could you describe your definition of what swing is for you?
Hmm.
An easy one to
You
start.
want the short version or the or the long version?
You can take as much time as you want.
Actually, I really never asked myself that precise question, like what it is for me. I try to describe it, the functionality of it, and many things about it, the different qualities of swing. But what it is exactly, probably the best personal definition I can give to it. Swing is what reflects the wave quality of time. Is what reflects a time that is functions with pulses, and so that is a time that has a wave shape, that a time that's bouncing. So swing is intimately connected to what time is. Maybe not time in general, that's a more philosophical question, but at least what musical time is for me.
So you would say that it's the wave in opposition to a more particle or single?
No, not particle, but more like yeah, of course there's this funny parallel we can of the wave quality of life or of time. So it's as opposed to a linear time, a time that would be linear, constant. So for me, musical time has nothing of that. Actually, it is the time perception, and then the reality of musical time is a successive states of expansion and compression of time. So yes, we can relate it to physics and Einstein's relativity, etc. But I think really the experience of the time flow as a musician is nothing linear, actually.
Mm-hmm. And how would you describe the musical phrasing that takes place to kind of establish this?
Well, I think it's then something very basic. It's phrasing, as we know, as we certainly know, at least in our Western music, Western classical. I mean, the Western music tradition. We do have this notion of a time that is something that can be expressive, that is made of we describe it as durations rather than events, and so the event-based description of rhythm comes from the notation, comes from the study of rhythm as we know it. But I think the practice of music, you know that the sound has an envelope, has a duration, and so time in music is not strictly event-based phenomena, and so I think swing also then, if not considered as from the event perspective, so swing is not displacement of events over a linear timeline. So swing is really this continuum of time that is bouncing, compressing, expanding, as I said before. So I believe we can, if we look really at the whole tradition of what it is, what music expression is about, and how it actually happens over the duration of the musical expression, then this notion of a continuum of time is something that we very much know about. Maybe less as rhythm or percussion players. Sometimes we sometimes forget about it, but you have a horn player, a singer. I mean, it's really obvious that you have a presence to what's happening. That is a continuum. That is a unbroken, uninterrupted phenomena, perception, etc. So swing for me is to put in that perspective.
So it's directly related to movement, you would say.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, if you look how the music tradition is transmitted, the oral part of our musical transmission is then made with gestures. We go da da da. We express it through movement, because then it's obvious we can really relate to it. So I believe that if not movement based per essence, which is something I do believe, but even though, I mean, even without going there, movement can express that quality. Is the best thing to express that, to illustrate that, to suggest that. So, yeah, very much movement based, yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because you were talking also about the importance of the ongoing thing, and that movement for me is something that's that's moving basically. So it's not stopping, and
Exactly.
it's ongoing thing.
Yeah, when we hit drums, or whatever movement I have to produce a musical event, that movement is not just a clock signal. It's not. It has anticipation. It has. So it's a whole movement that leads to the moment of the production of the sound, and yeah, it's not like I'm here and then suddenly I'm there producing the sound. There's a whole continuum of movements that is yeah, and of course this is not clock like. It's not yes or no.
Yeah.
You go between states of yes and no. The muscle have this contraction release movement. They alternate between those states, but it doesn't alternate like a square wave. It's more of a sine wave that goes from one state to the other. So, yeah.
Yeah. Can you describe this? You were talking about in the beginning that you hadn't really defined what swing is for you, but that you, that you developed, or that you found things that it does basically, or that how it functions, and what effects it has on the maybe groove perception or the music itself. Can you maybe go into that a little bit?
Yes, I can maybe restate what swing, the idea that I never questioned what swing is to me. I did question what swing does to me. But maybe a more deep philosophical question about what swing means is something that I would be inclined to start asking myself. I find this interesting. But then what it does to me, and is on different levels. I think it, to start with, it really emphasizes the pulse feel. So in many ways, but one of them is that indeed one way of describing it is that this pulsatory, so waving perception of time. So then the cycle of that wave is actually the pulse. So it strengthens the pulse field in my own perception. But I also believe that there's a quality of so this is because of the waveform itself, so to speak. It emphasizes the pulse, but also it makes the pulse objectively. It makes the pulse obvious, unavoidable, so to speak. Because regardless of the musical text that is expressed, the substrate in which that text takes place, so the meter or the rhythmical grid, or however we describe that, is happening in waves that are cyclic, that you can identify through swing. If I have just a regular waveform happening, I can identify the frequency of that cycle, but I'm not able to state which fundamental it is the harmonic of. So if I have a certain rate, and that rate is regular, quantized, a clock, and that rate, especially in the subdivision domain, so not in the pulse domain. So we have, like in psychoacoustics, we have a limited range of perception of a pulse that is really a pulse we can dance to. Maybe it's linked to the limitations of the body, that we cannot dance at 500 BPM. For real, we will have to really group those fast pulses to audiate a much slower pulse that our body can dance to. So maybe it's just body related and not brain. But so if I hear that rate that is regular, that is fast enough to not be a pulse but to be a subdivision of the pulse, I cannot state, unless there are some cultural elements like kick on the downbeat, things like that. I cannot, or a melody that really obviously points at how the pulse is organized. I'm not able to say. So from the clock itself, I'm not able to say, okay, is this a triplet subdivision of the pulse, or is this a four subdivision of the pulse, so like 16 notes to a quarter note pulse, or are those 8 notes? I'm not, of even 5 tuplets. So I'm not able just from the ta 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 to say, okay, where is the pulse? But if it's swinging, then there is a cycle embedded in this subdivision that points at the pulse with no possible avoiding. And then this is why it also emphasizes this pulse field. Not emphasizes necessarily, of course, the feel of it, but the perception of it, like that it is recognizable. I often say, okay, if an alien comes and listens to music and this alien is not able to distinguish between pitches, etc., the alien is only able to recognize when events take place. Then if it's not swinging, this alien is not able to identify the pulse cycle. Only the subpulse, only the subdivision will be identified, but then you lose. It's like you're playing an E pitch, and if you're not given the context to tell you that this E pitch is actually the major third of a C major chord, so if you don't hear the bass or you don't expect the bass, if this is out of the context, then all you hear is an E, but not the function of a major third. So you don't hear the ground, the tonality, which would be the pulse in that case of the C. So that is to make the parallel. So if my E is swinging, then I hear the C. And one can make this experiment even, with electronics. You have a regular pulse that you fix to a frequency, like the E, for example, and of course you don't hear any C in there. If it's a pure sine wave, even more, like no harmonics. And as soon as you start swinging that sine wave, then immediately, if you're swinging to a cycle, that would be the E. So if you swing that in groups of 5, then you hear that this 5 is actually a 5, that this 5 is actually the fifth harmonic of a much lower pitch. So really, just by swinging this sine waveform in groups of 5, you audiate the C frequency immediately, of course. So yeah, that's another reason. So yeah, those two reasons why it actually emphasizes the pulse feel. Emphasizes the pulse feel and makes the pulse cycle recognizable, that you can identify.
Yeah, maybe while we are on this this topic of making it recognizable or unambiguous, so to say, maybe we can talk a little bit about this odd meter topic.
Mm-hmm.
How to, that's how swing is effective to practice odd meters or to make them clear for a musician or a listener, so that they are not just in the air kind of conceptual thing, but really embodied.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, exactly. If you apply swing to an odd subdivision, then you hear that cycle of that odd subdivision as a real cycle. It's actually, maybe if someone is not used to doing that, it would take a while to get into that practice, but not too long from my experience. But the advantage of it is that immediately you start audiating for real that pulse cycle that is maybe subdivided in 5 or so. So to perform a 5/8 and avoid the temptation we have because of our habits also to actually audiate it in maybe a 5/4 with this middle bar syncopated, or even 5/2 sometimes. So if you really want to feel that cycle of the 5/8, just making these 5 groups swing because you're distributing longs and shorts makes that cycle really obvious. And I have experienced that it's a good way to approach if one has difficulties with, I don't know, playing short 7, short 5, things like that. Just introducing the swing concept, okay, all of a sudden you can really hear it.
Mm. Yeah. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about this, also the similarities of the rhythmic and pitch domain, this phenomenon of tempering, or this is also probably goes under the effects of swing, probably.
Yes.
Maybe you could address this in a more, obviously in a more general way, maybe.
So this is another property that swinging for example, the odd meter has, is that swing can be looked at as a bridge or a connector between one subdivision and the other. We know this statement that swing, like the jazz, American swing, is, we often say, okay, it's between the 2 and the 3 subdivision. It's not precisely a triplet field. It's of course not straight 8. It's there somewhere in between, and this already states that it's in between what, the 2 and the 3 subdivision. It is a bridge. It's a connector between those two, in many ways. So for me, as a connector, as something that's in between, swing, for example, jazz swing, a good, nice in-between swing feel can be audiated, forcing your ears a bit, but can be audiated as a triplet feel if you want. Or can be audiated as a straight 8 also, as 8 notes. So the listener, and even more the improviser, has the choice to relate to that swing from the 2 subdivision or functionality perspective, or from the 3 triplet. You have Cannonball, he's very tripletish, and in the same band you will have Miles Davis, that's really more to the straight 8. So means that this place where swing resides is an ambiguous place. It has both perspectives. It connects them together, but it gives also the possibility to actually look at it from one perspective or the other. And in that respect, it's very similar to the well-tempered Wohltemperiert Klavier, where we have 12 tones, but we have much more functions than just 12 tones. So we have D sharp and E flat, but it's that one key, and we could even have F double flat, right? So how tempering in the pitch domain works is that indeed I have this on the piano. I have this dark key that's there. That I can play in both contexts of if I need a D sharp or E flat or even F double flat. So I can play that, and yeah, just the naming them is one way of illustrating it, but the actual pitch that's there is really in between the D sharp and the E flat. It's somewhere in between. As a singer or a horn player, I mean, maybe, yeah, you certainly know that the violin player is not really having the same position if they are playing a D sharp or an A flat. And even to the piano, that is this tempered thing, but if I really playing a B major, or if I'm playing a C minor, that D sharp / E flat pitch is not going to be the same. I will pitch, intonate it to really reflect this functionality of the major third, or etc. So this position that the dark key on the piano has is this in-between position that is close enough to the expected D sharp and close enough to the expected E flat, so that our brain tolerates that it is consonant. That is, this is the expected pitch. But of course, if you're in just intonation and then you play that key, it will not work, because because that depending on where you base your just intonation, then it will really clash with the expected harmonic that you want to hear. So it's going to be out of tune. But that position that's really in between has this tolerance, so it's close enough to the expected pitch, whichever pitch is expected, that's going to be in that pocket, right? And so swing plays a very similar role. As I was saying, okay, the jazz swing can take in the triplet feel as well as the three subdivision as well as the two subdivision. Functionally speaking, it will be consonant, harmonious. It will fulfill the function that we expect from it in both cases. So yeah, that's the comparison. So yes, for me, swinging also has this tempering property, but in the rhythm domain.
So you would say this pitch discrepancy is also like if we kind of transfer it to the rhythmic domain, it's something that our ear accepts, like a phlegm or something in the rhythmic domain.
Yeah, exactly. So if it's close enough.
Yeah, when it's getting too large, then it's two events, and then it's not one thing anymore.
Yes. I don't know too precisely about psychoacoustics, but of course we have something similar depending on where you are in the range of perception in the pitch domain. Too low, you don't hear the. Well, it changes your perception of what's a true harmonic, a true function, or what's not. So that whole functional perception is really dependent on the speed. So of course, that flam, if I slow this extremely down, I can happen to have this happen, and 1 year later the other one, right? If I slow extremely, and of course this will not be perceived by the brain as a synced event.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a limit of that perception. So this absolute distance between the two events, so the time interval, will be taken as something that's accepted as synchronous only within a certain range of perception. So yes, that neighboring of the expected accent or the expected pitch is playing an essential role in this tempering effect. Yes.
Yeah, and so what you were just saying that the let's call it a jazz swing can be between the eighth note and the triplet feel, but maybe it would be good to talk a little bit about. I mean, it's clear that it's not 100% the eighth note, and it's not 100% the triplet, and that it's two notes basically, and that it's long and short, basically.
Yeah.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about what this observation means for other groups of notes, except for the two notes we have in jazz swing, or what other kinds of swing can be observed in the world or created with this observation.
Well, to start with, the swing itself, and some scholars have described it as, okay, no, it's actually it's in the 5-reed. So the correct way of swinging is having this 3-2 long short. So even whenever you swing, if you want to really swing correctly, you have to really subdivide the whole thing in 5 and play this 3/2 thing, and then this is where swing is supposed to be, and we could go further, right? We could go say, okay, 4/3 or 5/3. So. Well, that's the first thing, is that the same way when you're swinging, it has the functionality of being a 2 subdivision. You imagine it, perform it as a 2 subdivision, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. That's how you. Very rarely someone would effectively be in the 5 tablet subdivision, but this would be possible, of course, if it's not too fast, etc. So the same way we can audiate it as a 3, we can audiate it as a 5 and as a 7 and that whatever. And that's one beauty of being in between, and especially in between the 2-to-1 ratio, is that actually if you're in the 2-to-1 ratio, and again is really tempo dependent, the whole thing. But if your tempo is not accurate, but wisely chosen. So depending on if your tempo is fine, etc., then of course you can bring in all those different speeds. But as soon as you are in between the 2-to-1 ratio, which would be between the long and the short, so which would be then between the straight 8 note and the triplet feel, if applied to jazz swing, already to the straight 2 or to the straight 3, you're having this tempering effect, where it's close enough so that your brain accepts it as being a 2 or being a 3. And because, of course, if you go higher in the subdivision, you make this even closer, actually, to the expected 5 or to the expected 7 or whatever. So you are in this, maybe we can call it the gray zone or whatever, where actually all subdivisions are possible and will sound harmonious. All subdivisions of the actual pulse. So it is, you actually have all of a sudden a rich timbre of the pulse, okay, where before you would have only the one harmonic. You have the pulse, but okay, only the octave or the fifth, so you have a poor sound in terms of overtones, of harmonics, so timbre. But as soon as you swing, you have this very rich pulse in terms of possible harmonics that fit in, and you really audiate them. And again, to do the experiment with electronics is very, very nice, because indeed you not only hear one overtone pitch, so all of a sudden you have many pitches. You have a rich timbre that appears there. So this is one thing. And the other thing is, of course, that if you apply this long-short distribution with other subdivisions and the 2 subdivisions that we are used to, like when it comes to swing, while you have that same phenomena, like the richness of timbre, and then the richness of consonant other ratios or the subdivisions that would fit in what you're doing. But with other subdivisions, with maybe higher than 2. So some people know about the West African triplet or the Brazilian 16th, or there are some known examples of things that people call swing. Brazilians call their phrased 16 note, they call it swing, although it's not a 2-note swing, it's a 4-note swing. But besides those examples, that not everybody in the academic world knows about. I'm not academic, I'm talking about, jazz schools. So maybe some musicologists have pointed to this phenomena one way or another, but so we know little about it. But of course, if we apply this swing to 5-tuplet, for example, so if we swing our fast 5/8, then you have a similar phenomena. So you have a 5, but that's totally harmonious with actually, and even if you enter this gray zone, then to actually any other subdivision. So it allows the fanciest thing that people consider when looking at this is that, okay, it allows those quite challenging ratios. So yeah, I'm able to play, okay, not only 7/5, but 11/5 or 13 or and all ratios. Well, speaking of, it goes back to the tempering, right? The main advantage of a well-tempered clavier is that every pitch in the scale, all of the 12 pitches that compose this well-tempered scale, are having multiple possible functions to each and every other element of the scale, okay, which in just intonation is not possible, because then you have a root and every other pitch has a reason to be, a meaning of life that is strictly related to that original pitch. That is the fundamental of your just intonation. And in the well-tempered, each and every pitch has a function, audible function, harmonic function, to each and every other pitch, and not only one, sometimes even many. So you have this pitch that can be the minor third or the sharp 9, you know, things like that. So as you swing and you enter into this richness of timbre, or where actually all different ratios, they will sound consonant in terms of functionally accurate to your swinging subdivision, it has a similar effect. So the tempering gets there also. So by swinging the subdivision and having different possible swings, you somehow slowly get into a general perception of all those subdivisions, etc., that are relative to each other somehow in a functional way. So this is the first thing that normally people are attracted to when exposed to this approach, is that they, oh wow, I can perform 17/9. That's so cool. But there is this hidden gem for me, really, the golden dust in the center, the golden can, that is about not performing ratios, but this quality of time that it brings. So a phrased 5-tuplet, okay, it helps me audiate, as we were discussing before. It helps me audiate that cycle of 5 on one hand, but also through its timbre, through its depending on which swing you chose, meaning how you distribute your longs and shorts, then it will have a certain color. Even Klangfarbe, we could make this parallel. So, and that's really something that is, for me, opened a new universe of perceptions. there are so many different fives, even at the same tempo, and each of them has its very specific and unique taste and color, or I don't know how to put it, and this is something that I enjoy and has a lot of value for me. Of course, it's super cool that it enables me to play 11 of that 5 and whatever I want, but more so is really the beauty of the different colors. So it's been for me like really stepping out of a colorblind world into all of a sudden discovering all the colors of nature, all the flowers. Suddenly it's not, you get out of the black and white perception, and whoa, it's so rich. And then it's of course a parameter of expression.
Yeah. What I was just thinking also is that this enrichment the functionality also enables this transition of different subdivisions or pulses, like a different form of maybe in the pitch domain like a modulation, but in the rhythmic domain a pulse modulation that is not just a reinterpretation of the subdivision or the pulse, but gradual movement, like what you call morphing, for example.
Yes.
Maybe you could talk about this.
Yeah, that's also a fancy thing. Morphing. But yeah, morphing could be compared to modulating the timbre of your instrument. Okay, so well, if you play an instrument that's able to, where you have to sustain your action to sustain the sound, like not like on the piano where when you play it, then the envelope of the sound, the timbre is given. So then, or through electronics, modulating filters and things. So this rhythm morphing for me feels a bit similar to that. Is actually changing the timbre of the pulse. And of course, as there are many things that have been done in spectral music, and even more with microtonality now, where you have those switch, and if you're using the timbre of in your composition, in your expression, then you know that you can alter the timbre of your sound so that it actually, that overtone is brought up, and then it's almost like having this pitch that you now can relate to and do a harmonic modulation about. I think that direction. So something similar happens also with in the pulse domain with morphing. So if you're able to modulate the amount of swing and modulate the type of swing that you're applying to your subdivision, then you get into this again multifunctional, but where you can indeed make a rhythm glissando, or a rhythm crossfade, or I don't know how to say that, but where indeed the rhythms are morphing from one color, one timbre to another, and then having a rhythm modulation. So yeah, but it's somehow an extension of this idea of the multifunctionality, where the same way it enables me to play this 11/5 or whatever, it will then enable me to proceed to a rhythm modulation that is based on the 11/5 doublet rather than the triplet or the. So yes, it opens the door to more ratio-wise complex rhythm modulations. Of course. So yeah, I don't know if I was actually answering to I mean, or talking about what you had precisely in mind there.
Yeah, I think it was great. What I was just thinking about is also this, while we were talking about the what you were just calling the timbre of the pulse, or that there are, yeah, basically discovering this richness, that one aspect of this the different timbres of the pulse is also this gravity aspect. Like what would you say? Yeah, I don't know how to phrase this question properly, but just you have these terms of in the common musicians' language, like a laid back feeling, or something that the pulse feels rushed or something. Maybe you can shortly talk about this balance of gravity of the pulse.
Yeah, so I mean, if I describe it in terms of math or physics, is I have the pulse cycle, and if the subdivision is evenly distributed, more precisely, not even in terms of even versus odd, so really evenly distributed. The energy that is available throughout the pulse cycle, because it is evenly distributed, is balanced in terms that there is as much energy. If I look at the pulse cycle and I subdivide it in two parts, one part being the first half and the other part being the second half. So, in terms of closeness to a pulse moment, so after the half of the pulse cycle, I am closer to the next pulse that I am to the previous one.
Yeah.
Right? And vice versa. If I am before that half pulse cycle, that event that I would play there, it would be closer to the pulse that just occurred than it is to the next pulse moment. Not pulse cycle, pulse moment. So again, a evenly distributed, so not swinging, because the point of swing is to distribute not evenly, is to have longs and shorts. So an evenly distributed subdivision system, all the events there, if you sum them up, it will have as much energy towards the next pulse that it has to the previous one. So it will be well balanced in that respect. So whichever subdivision you take, it will be well balanced. But if you swing, you might, as for example in jazz swing, you might actually displace energy towards one side or the other one. And so for me, if you displace this energy, if there's more energy available closer to the next pulse, I call this a positive groove balance. And if you happen to have more energy closer than the previous pulse, then I call this a negative groove balance. And my observation is that this actually reflects pretty well this feeling of laid back or drive or that, you know, how we can describe, yeah, elements of groove. Yeah, for me, something is laid back because it has this more energy towards the pulse that just occurred than it has to the next one. And so how I represent this to myself is that when something has a groove, a positive groove balance, it actually means that the way I audiate or I represent myself, how events are connected, how they come together in one phrase. So really phrasing in that phrase perspective. Then I'll be considering the pulse moment as a destination. It's positive, so things are closer than that to that moment. So the rhythmically speaking, the events are calling for the pulse. Your phrase lands on the pulse. So the pulse moment is a landing point. It's something you aim at. As opposed to being some moment from which everything, for example, echoes or unfolds from the pulse moment. And this would be more the laid back or negative groove balance.
So it's not something with the pulse itself changing, but more the wave form.
Yeah, exactly. So if I translate that into that wave perception of the time, different grooving pulses will have will correspond to different wave forms, wave shapes. It all has the same pulse cycle, but it's bouncing more like this or more like that, or that's how I present it, how I imagine it, and so it's not displacement of the laid back for me. It's definitely not displacement of the beat, because beat is the root. How can I displace the beat? Okay, so it's like, okay, I indeed can keep a pitch and change the root. So by modulating, if I have this E example, and I have a C root that makes it the major third. So I can slightly pitch my E so that it gets slightly out of tune one way or the other, so that it's a little flat or a little sharp. I can apply this, and I could achieve the same thing to the root to suggest the same effect, right? But as long as the root remains the root, functionally speaking, my ear will adapt, and actually it's the E that will sound if I maintain that, okay? So if I have this interval, like a 10th interval, the major third and the root, and the interval is a bit short, it's never the root that's going to sound out of tune. It is the harmonic, right? And so for me it's the same in rhythmically speaking. It cannot be that the beat is displaced. The beat is a beat. Downbeat is your root note, is your fundamental. So if you maintain a groove a certain way, it's rather the other one that is. So it's really the moment of the pulse is always the moment of the pulse. What is modulated, what is altered, is how it bounces, what the shape of time in between those pulse moments. That's.
Yeah, thank you. I think we could talk about this topic for a few more days.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Which we will hopefully do without the cameras. But
of course.
I would like to change the subject a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, just a little bit, but there is also this whole computational and mathematical part of this thing that I'm also quite interested in because of my bit of background in mathematics. And I mean, I'm not too much into programming, but maybe you can talk a little bit about what you did on this front. Like, I know that there's this plugin for Macs, and what are your recent discoveries in that domain? Maybe that's also something to talk about for a few days, but
yeah.
we can try.
Okay, I am interested in bringing it to electronics or in different ways for I think two reasons. One of them is to have computer-based music featuring that approach for performance and for teaching and for experimenting. But also I'm interested in more fundamentally in trying to discover what's the behavior of this in terms of physics, mathematically speaking, what's there. Actually, it's a way of abstracting from the reality here that I have been experimenting, like really in the practice, and trying to order it with some, to look, okay, what's the real process there. And I've been doing this a few times, this back and forth, because when you go there, you can maybe generalize or abstract from first abstract and then try to operate some generalization. And then when you have the generalization, then you confront it with reality, and then you try to predict something about reality that you didn't observe. And then yes, it is there. And so that's how I think research in general could be described. This movement of back and forth between unfolding and application from a concept, or observation and trying to find concepts out of this observation. So then for me, the computer mathematics, all this has these two play these two roles for me. Okay, one of the performance teaching, etc., so that I have the computer able to feature these elements, and the other hand the research. So in that respect, so more research, there are many options or directions that I just shortly explored. One of them would be to represent your tuplet as a point in a multidimensional space, and your space has as many dimensions as your tuplet is about. So basically speaking, if I'm speaking of triplets, I can represent any triplet, like successive 3 durations, as a point in the three-dimensional space, which coordinates will be the three durations, for example. And then study the triplets and this groove phenomena that I'm describing from this perspective. From this perspective. So this has been one direction, which is super interesting because you suddenly look at rhythm. You actually just because your coordinate system is oriented, then you elude time actually from the equation, which is funny. And so yeah, it's nice to observe certain things. Yeah, I don't know if I should go there in detail or speak about, because then without a drawing, without writing down. But like for example, in the three-dimensional space, so what I'm looking at is subdivision of the pulse. So the pulse is a unit. So of course I'm looking at triplets whose sum is 1 because this is the unit. Okay, so it so happens that all points in the three-dimensional space whose sum of coordinates equal 1, they are comprised in one basic triangle. So it happens to be two-dimensional actually. So looking at all the possible phrasings of the triplet, if I just distinguish between longs and shorts, then all the meaningful triplets, they actually can be found over very just segments in this triangle. So it's interesting that to consider the morphing and traveling from one timbre of the pulse in triplets to another as just a travel in this triangle, and generally just following axis of this triangle, and normally those axes are the ones that I don't know the name in English. Well, that connects the center, the barycenter of the triangle with one edge. So this is where you have your, that's the space you're moving in when operating those. So at the end, it's not a multi-dimensional space study. It's a study of those minimal figures of the dimension.
Yeah.
Right. So like the triangle is the minimal geometrical figure. I mean, you don't have a figure with two angles. So 3 angles is the minimum you have in the two-dimensional space. So it's about studying triangles and tetraedral. And so those figures that in each dimensional space are the minimal figures, and study within those figures symmetry and the barycenter, because the barycenter of each of those figures would be the straight tuplet. So yeah, that's one direction, the vector approach. Another thing maybe that's interesting to mention is the okay, so when yeah, this is going to be I need to introduce that a little bit. So when looking at the possible distributions of longs and shorts, you can have a theoretical tuplet or swing that is theoretically there. So for example, I could phrase 7 having 3 longs and 4 shorts, and the 4 shorts are one after the other, so they are grouped together. So this theoretically, having long, 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 short, 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 long, this is theoretically possible, but I will not, it will be very difficult for my perception to really identify this as a phrase or a swinging seven. And the reason is that these, as soon as I start morphing, or as soon as this phrasing starts to take place, the positions, now let's speak of positions of the events, they get really far from the expected evenly distributed positions, right? So, I mean, a phrase 7, like the one I proposed, is extremely distant from the straight 7, as opposed to a well-distributed long and short system where, so if I'm having 4 shorts and 3 longs, as I said, so maybe I start with the short and I make short, long, short, long, short, long, short. So it's symmetrical, it's well distributed. I can't find a better distribution of that. So that's actually the closest swinging 7 or 7 distribution, longs and short distribution, having 3 shorts and 4 long, 3 longs and 4 shorts. That's going to be the closest one among all possible combinations of 3 longs and 4 shorts. That's going to be the closest one to the straight 7 tuplet. So this is another quality of your swing elements, is how distant they are. So hence, how much energy how much tension the straight could represent to them, or vice versa. So there's a potential energy there because of the 2 points. And
sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I read this thing about the bell patterns of African music, and this observation of these longs and shorts being like mostly ideally distributed.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
that kind of
that's Euclidean rhythms. Toussaint is the name, I think, of the musicologist that pointed at this. So yeah, some people know now about Euclidean rhythms, and so Euclidean rhythms, indeed, it's that same idea. Is okay, given a certain number of steps that I have, how can I best distribute a lower number of accents? And so there are different approaches. There's a known algorithm for that. It's called the Björklund algorithm. It comes from computer science, actually, and it's used, for example, to draw a oblique line on your screen. Okay, so because it's pixelized, so it is quantized. So you don't have a real line. So you have a certain pixels going straight one line, and then you drop. And so how to best distribute those drops would be something that's subject to this algorithm to optimize that. Or in a lab, you have 12 dots for your chemical tubes that you need to rotate, because you need to do that. And you have only 7 tubes. Okay, where to place those 7 tubes so that the rotation is well balanced and you will not destroy your machine. I mean, you optimize the length of life of your machine. So that is also the same. How to distribute 7 pulses in 12 steps.
Yeah.
So yeah, Euclidean rhythms. Now Euclidean rhythms, they are defined not by how close it is to the straight 7. It is just, the question is what's the best distribution of, for example, 7/12. And and there are many possible answers to that, because I mean, if you rotate your machine and you have, so it's the same. So in that respect, a swing that is long short because you want to distribute 2/3, or short long, they're both valid because they're both the best distribution, right? But what I'm looking at is not asking the question what is the best distribution, is which distribution is actually the closest to the straight, because it's oriented, because I have an origin which is the downbeat. Okay, so it's not about rotating. So if I do so those are two shorts and one long. So if I put where I put the pulse will be different. I can choose to do 1, 2, to put the pulse here, or right. So those are really three different, and it feels different in terms of groove balance, etc. And it so happens that they are absolutely not equal if you look at which one is the closest to the straight triplet in that case. So then this is also some research I'm doing. I'm trying to redefine this idea of Euclidean rhythm from this perspective. Okay, I want the closest to the expected straight tuplet, given it's oriented and I have an origin. I have a downbeat, right? So then I call this couplet, like for quantized tuplet, and I am trying to find a signal-based solution that produces these couplets, this result, rather than an algorithmic approach. And so I'm looking at this. This is another direction of research. So, and yeah, basically a couplet will satisfy the definition of a Euclidean rhythm, but not vice versa. Not necessarily vice versa. And yeah, it so happens that indeed, just playing with ratios of frequencies, if you add signals based on those, corresponding to those frequencies, just by addition, you actually come to this couplet. It points so one definition is that one result is that. For example, the couplet of 3/4, which happens to be so out of the three examples I gave before, this one is the closest to the straight triplet. So if I look at the peaks of a signal made of a 3/4 two cosine added, two added cosines, and if I look at the peaks of this signal, if I look at the three highest peaks, because I will have a cycle that's one and one cosine being the 3 times the frequency of this one, and the other 4 times the frequency of this one. So the resulting signal will be cyclic with a period of 1. But within that period of 1, that's repeating, then I look at the 3 highest signals. The couplet, so actually 1/4, 2/4, 1/4 of the period, can be attained by observing these three highest peaks when the fourth signal tends to infinity. So if you have a straight, you have your the 3 hertz frequency signal, and you add 4 hertz frequency whose amplitude tends to the infinite, then the 3 highest peaks of that signal are going to be those selected 3 from the 4 signals. So it will be the couplet. So this is also something I'm trying to observe, and I mean this is now proof. Really, it works. But now, okay, what's the behavior when I'm adding multiple signals, etc. So that's the whole. So from a sequence. So from a I don't know the word in English. So from a sequence of numbers perspective, so then durations perspective, what's the behavior of this harmonic approach? Yeah, this is another direction.
I think we have to do round 2 at some point with,
Okay,
with whiteboard and screen, or over Zoom where we can show something visually. Otherwise, that's probably too difficult.
Yeah.
But it's great. I mean.
But there's a few more like this. So I am not really disciplined about those options of research, but every now and then I come back to it and do my models and my programming and experiment.
Yeah, I think one aspect that I would really like to still bring out is that, I mean, if you're listening to this, if you're not familiar with your music as a listener of this interview, maybe you get the impression that it's all very theoretical and abstract and
sure.
I think it's very important to state that this is not the case, and it's all matter of playful exploration, and also this aspect that I mean there's also a connection to the scientific or mathematical thing, but that this whole thing is actually very natural. So so we were talking about triangles before, that there are basically no perfect triangles in nature, and so it's also this aspect that this rich rhythmic timbre of swinging things is actually the natural thing in a way.
I believe so, or at least it feels very organic.
Yeah.
It feels very organic, and but I believe there's something natural. I mean, I've been in the French system. When you go through music education, even before you touch the instrument, you have to go through the solfège class, where you actually learn about the name of notes, and you learn how to count and things really like that. And so you have this music theory kind of first touch with music before you touch the instrument. I think this is changing, luckily, but it was like this. And in that context, also because I've been sometimes there replacing to teach, or maybe you can also connect to that. Typically you have those kids that are discovering about the triplet, so the quarter note triplet, and they will, all of them go. And I think I even saw one student once showed me, I don't remember his name, but really a quite famous cello player from the classical, an old guy, but from the classical tradition. So really not only a professional, but a great artist on this instrument, that was giving a master class, etc. And at some point, the score says a triplet, and he was performing. unfortunately, I don't even remember who showed me this, because this would be a great example to show. Not to make fun of that person, of course not, but really to state that there is something that's very profound and natural, I believe, that's happening there. And same with kids, is that almost always they go like triole, triole, triole. That's how you play triplets. And not triole, triole. So it's not straight. You go triole, triole. So you really have this displacement of two longs and shorts. And why? Because your brain wants to harmonize the two. So you want to bring the triplet in the two subdivision. So you go, that's a natural thing to try to bring them together. Yeah, so it does reflect something natural. So maybe we should stop telling people that, no, this is not a triplet, you're doing it wrong, because it's written like this, of course. But if you put a 2 and a 3 together, they have to influence each other. It's not, that's nature. I think that's then something that's natural, as opposed to the expected, okay, straight triangle figure. So of course in math we have all this abstract. We can make definitions and look at things that are not real in that sense. Yet respecting a set of rules and a method, etc. But we can define the square root of a negative number. We can define, but it's not real. Then, of course, we can use whatever we find through this with the generalizations, etc., that are applied, and then we find in applied science. But we are allowed to define something that's not real. So of course, all these very theoretical presentations that I often have may sound okay. It's disconnected from reality, but yeah, indeed, for me, well, it really came out of first of observation and practice, like body physical practice, and then when looking back at practice, at reality from these abstract concepts maybe that I have, it does reflect, I believe, something that is of nature, that is natural, or that feels comfortable and analog, not digital, not so yeah, natural in that round. There's a roundness, there's a smoothness of that whole thing when it's really happening, that makes it feel organic, comfortable, natural.
Yeah. I have one closing question.
Yeah.
The most simple question for the end. Do you think there is some meaning in making music, or is what does it mean to you?
Yes, there's meaning in making music, and it's the same meaning that of basically making anything, but not quite. I think artists, in the broader sense of the word, what they do, what we do, is something that humans do, and it's a very identifiable operation of humans, of the human brains, which is to connect things. We look at reality, or we look at whatever we have in mind. We look at abstract concepts. And what we do is we connect them in one way or another. And I think this is essence of, for me, this is essence of art in general, and of course of music. So to make it to put it very simply, okay, musicians, they connect pitches, tones, etc. together, and painters they connect shapes and colors, and poets they connect words, and mathematicians they will connect mathematical concepts or formulas or and so on and so on, and so this activity to deal with binding elements of contemplation, elements of reality, to look not at the element for itself, for what it is, but actually to try to make a connection between, and to try to make sense of it, or make fun of it, or to whatever it is. But I think this is something that we do as humans. Whether we are creating this, or we are studying these connections, or we are actually showing the world that they exist, or whatever we do, but when we deal with that connecting thing, I think this is what art is about in depth. So that's how I believe that making music proceeds. So it can be through research or study or just practice, but this is okay. I'm trying to connect those two chords with my line. You know, it's always about that. So and I think the profound meaning and purpose for that now, socially speaking, politically speaking, is that those connections. I can be of the opinion, philosophical opinion, that actually the world is connected, is infinite fabric of connections everywhere, that everything in the world is connected to everything, and so that doing this art in that sense is just actually the best way to describe reality. So in that respect, poetry describes reality better than any other language, because there I'm able to connect an orange and the blue moon. You know, then there is a connection, that because I put those two concepts or words or images together, I establish the connection. Maybe I don't establish, I just reveal the connection. So that's a philosophical point of view, to say everything's connected, and what we are doing is just showing it, making it obvious. By doing that, we give access to that reality to everyone that is looking at what we do. But whether we do this or not, another thing is that those multiple connections, they indeed, the one that artists create, let's say they're not real, but it generates sense in some way, even imaginary sense. And all those connections together, they constitute the fabric that holds society together. This is what culture very broadly looked at. It's not culture, art, artists and musicians that should be paid, or that, but culture in general. All the means by which we connect elements of reality, they constitute this human culture that holds the society together. So I think it's important that we do it, or that some people do it, if it's not ourselves, but that is continued, because otherwise this fabric can break, zerrissen. Yeah, and this is not so good. So I think, so for me, that's, sorry for the long answer, but that's really the purpose of doing music for me, as much as doing anything actually, is I try and then enjoy working on that fabric, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, well,
Thank you for coming here all the way.
Yeah, thanks for the
And,
invitation. Well, really.
I'm really happy that we could do it, and
Yeah, me too.
yeah, thank you for
Cool.
talking today.
Cool.